My brother's kids banged on my door at 2 a.m. Their parents locked them out again. So I taught him a lesson he'll never forget. Hey Reddit, I never thought I'd be the kind of person broadcasting family chaos to strangers online, but this whole situation spiraled so far out of control that I need to put it somewhere. Maybe someone out there has dealt with something similar. Maybe this will just help me process what happened. Either way, here we go. My brother kept locking his kids outside in the middle of the night, literally leaving them to fend for themselves, until the night I finally snapped and made sure he'd never pull something like that again. I'm 34, single, and work as an electrician. Mostly commercial contracts, office buildings, warehouses, retail renovations, stuff like that. I own a modest 2-bedroom house in a quiet middle-class neighborhood where people mow their lawns, keep their properties tidy, and don't throw parties at 3 a.m. or leave junk cars rusting in the driveway. It's calm, predictable, and safe, exactly what I wanted after years of apartment living with paper-thin walls, stomping neighbors who sounded like they wrestled furniture at midnight, and the general lack of boundaries that comes with cramped city living. I bought the place 5 years ago when I was 29 after saving every bit I could, working overtime, skipping trips, and living cheap so I could afford the down payment. The neighborhood's older but well kept. Big trees, kids playing outside, neighbors who wave when you drive by. My house isn't fancy. Built in the 70s, could use updates, but it's sturdy. I've been renovating it slowly, using skills from work and endless YouTube tutorials. My brother Tyler is 38, married to Christina, and they have 2 kids, Emma, age 8, and Logan, age 6. On the outside, they look like your typical suburban family. Nice house, 2 cars, smiling Christmas photos. But behind the curtains, total chaos. Tyler and I grew up in the same home but turned out nothing alike. I learned early that if I wanted something, I had to grind for it. Tyler learned that if he complained loudly enough, someone, usually our parents, would fix things for him. They coddled him nonstop, made excuses for every mistake, and by high school the pattern was cemented. I was the dependable one. He was the golden boy who just needed time, just had a lot going on, or whatever excuse they felt like using. When he married Christina 7 years ago, I knew it wouldn't end well. She acts like kids are accessories, fun until they require effort. They had Emma almost immediately, then Logan 2 years later, and reality slapped them both in the face. Kids need consistency. Kids need attention. Kids need parents. But instead of stepping up, they seemed to resent the responsibility. At first it was small stuff. They'd complain at family gatherings about being exhausted, about how the kids were too much, about never getting time alone. But instead of adjusting their routines or building any structure, they just got increasingly impatient and dismissive with their own children. I started noticing little moments that didn't sit right. Tyler snapping at Emma over harmless questions. Christina completely ignoring Logan when he tried to show her something he made. The kids sitting silently, with tablets during dinners, afraid to interrupt. If they made noise, the looks they'd get could freeze water. But I kept my mouth shut. People parent differently. Stress affects everyone. I told myself it wasn't my place, but they didn't improve. They got dramatically worse. The first real wake-up call happened on a random Tuesday night in late September, about 6 months ago. I was dead asleep, actually having a decent dream for once, when someone started pounding on my front door at 2:17 a.m., not knocking, not ringing the bell, pounding like their life depended on it. I shot up, heart hammering, grabbed my phone, and crept to the peephole, half expecting a cop, a neighbor in crisis, or some emergency situation. It wasn't any of those things. Under the porch light were 2 tiny silhouettes, my niece and nephew, Emma and Logan, standing in their thin pajamas, no jackets, no shoes, their socks soaked from the cold ground. Emma clutched Logan's hand while he sobbed uncontrollably, shaking so hard he could barely stand. I ripped the door open, freezing air blasting into the house. "What are you 2 doing out here? It's the middle of the night." Emma's eyes were swollen and red. Her voice barely came out. "Mom and Dad locked us out. We knocked and knocked, but they won't let us in. We didn't know where else to go." My entire body went numb. It was 40 degrees outside. These kids walked 3 blocks in the dark wearing nothing but pajamas. I rushed them inside, shut the door, grabbed every blanket I could find, and wrapped them up on the couch. Logan was trembling, his face patchy from crying. Emma was trying so hard to look brave, but the fear in her eyes was unmistakable. She looked like an 8-year-old trying to be a parent. Once they were warm, I crouched in front of them. "Tell me everything. What exactly happened?" Emma took a long, shaky breath and explained. They'd been watching TV way past bedtime. Their parents were in the master bedroom with the door closed as usual. At some point, Emma got hungry and went to the kitchen. When she came back, she noticed the front door wide open and went to close it because the house was cold. When she turned around, the bedroom door was shut and locked. She knocked and called for them, but they ignored her. Then she realized Logan wasn't in the living room. He'd gone outside to check on their old retriever in the backyard. When Logan tried to come inside, every door was locked. Front door, back door, everything. Their parents didn't answer knocking, yelling, the doorbell, nothing. So the kids stood outside, freezing, panicking, before Emma remembered my house. They walked all the way to me barefoot in the dark because they had no one else they trusted enough to go to. I felt something inside me break. I grabbed my phone and called Tyler, fighting to keep my voice level when all I wanted was to reach through the phone and drag him into reality. The phone rang 4 times before he finally answered. His voice sounded groggy, irritated, like I had the nerve to disturb him for something trivial. "What? Your kids are at my place. You locked them out." There was a long beat of silence on his end. Then, in a tone so casual it made my skin crawl, he said, "What are you talking about? Emma and Logan are sitting on my couch right now wrapped in blankets. They walked 3 blocks here at 2 in the morning because you and Christina locked them outside." "We didn't lock them out," he said flatly. "They probably went outside to play around or something, and the door closed behind them. Kids do weird stuff." "Tyler," I said sharply, "Emma told me you locked your bedroom door and ignored them. Logan was stuck outside trying to get back in. It's 40 degrees out. They're wearing thin pajamas. She's probably exaggerating like kids always do. We were sleeping, didn't hear anything. Just send them home." "Send them home?" I repeated, stunned. "It's 2 a.m., they're freezing, wearing no coats, no shoes, and they walked here in the dark. They can't just walk back." "So drive them over," he said, annoyed. "I'm not getting out of bed for this. I have work in the morning." That was the exact moment I realized this wasn't some bizarre misunderstanding or a one-off mistake. He wasn't alarmed. He wasn't asking if they were hurt or scared. He wasn't relieved that Emma and Logan were safe. He was just irritated I had woken him up and expected him to be a parent. I drove them back anyway because they needed their own beds, school clothes, backpacks, basic things. The entire ride, Emma stared out the window with this numb expression that broke my heart. Logan fell asleep leaning against her shoulder, completely drained from crying and freezing his little body off. When we got there, Tyler opened the door wearing nothing but boxers and an undershirt. He looked put out like we'd interrupted a nap. He didn't thank me, didn't hug the kids, didn't ask if they were okay, didn't even glance at them. He just put his hands on their shoulders, nudged them inside, and shut the door in my face like I was a door-to-door salesman. I stood on his porch for a full minute, trying to process the coldness of it all, the total disregard for his kids, the absence of even basic parental instinct, the way he dismissed their fear without a second thought. Something was deeply fundamentally wrong in that home. And Emma and Logan were the ones suffering for it. When I got back to my house, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying those moments, Emma's trembling voice, Logan's tears, their tiny sock-covered feet on my porch at 2 in the morning. 2 little kids walking alone in the dark because their parents had locked them outside. The images looped in my mind all night. I tried convincing myself it had to be a freak incident. Maybe Tyler had been half asleep. Maybe he didn't understand what had happened. Maybe, just maybe, it wouldn't happen again. I was wrong. Horribly, utterly wrong. 2 weeks later, on a Friday night, it happened again. This time, the pounding on my door started at 1:45 a.m. Same frantic knocking. Same 2 kids standing on my porch in thin pajamas. Same bare feet, now even colder because it was October and temperatures were dipping into the low 30s. "They did it again," Emma said when I opened the door. Her voice wasn't scared this time. It was hollow, resigned, like she'd accepted this as part of her life. I pulled them inside, wrapped them up, and this time I asked much more precise questions. I needed to know everything. "Start at the beginning. Tell me everything that happened tonight. Every detail," Emma explained in a flat, exhausted tone. They had both been asleep for once. Around 1 a.m., Logan woke up desperately needing the bathroom, but their bedroom door was locked from the outside. He knocked, called for their parents, tried the knob again and again. Nothing. He couldn't hold it and ended up having an accident right by the door, which woke Emma up. They both started banging louder, shouting for their mom and dad to open the door. Nobody came. No response at all. Emma said she could hear the TV playing in the living room, could see the glow of the screen under the gap of the door. She knew someone was awake. They just didn't care. Eventually, Emma figured out how to wedge a hanger under the window screen and pop it out, and that's when my stomach dropped. They climbed out a second-floor bedroom window. 2 little kids, an 80-year-old and a 6-year-old, crawled out a window in the middle of the night because they had no other way out. They dropped into bushes below, thankfully avoiding serious injury, and then walked to my house again because they couldn't get back inside. A second-story window. I still can't think about that without feeling sick. This time I documented everything. I took photos, pictures of their pajamas still damp from Logan's accident, their bare feet dirty from walking on the sidewalk, the timestamp on my phone showing 1:45 a.m. I recorded Emma explaining the entire sequence of events, step by step, her voice so tired it barely sounded like a kid's anymore. Then I called Tyler. This conversation was even worse. He didn't pretend to be confused. He didn't pretend he cared. "They're at your place again, huh?" he said, like he was talking about a package being delivered to the wrong address. "You locked them in their bedroom," I said. "They had to climb out a second-story window." "We lock their door so they don't wander around and get into things," he replied. "It's called structure. Maybe if you had kids, you'd understand." "Tyler, Logan needed the bathroom. He's 6. You locked him in with no way out. That's his choice to climb out the window," he said, not even blinking metaphorically. "He should have gone back to sleep. And he's old enough to hold it until morning." The cruelty in his voice was so casual it made me shake, but I kept my tone calm. I told him I was bringing the kids back, hung up, and refused to say anything else that might make things worse for Emma and Logan. When I brought them home, Tyler didn't open the door. Christina did. She looked annoyed, as if pausing her TV show was the biggest inconvenience of her night. She took the kids wordlessly and closed the door without so much as a thank you or a glance at their faces. That was the moment. I finally made up my mind I needed to seriously document everything. The next morning, I bought a notebook specifically for this situation and started recording dates. I filled that notebook with dates, times, direct quotes, and step-by-step accounts of everything the kids told me. I took more photos, saved all the recordings, and kept everything organized because deep down I knew this wasn't going to magically stop. At some point, I was going to need indisputable evidence, a full record, something that no one could deny. The third incident happened 3 weeks later, and somehow, it was worse than the first two. It was a school night, around 11:30 p.m., when my doorbell rang. This time, only Emma was standing there. No Logan. She was shivering, hugging herself, trying to keep warm. "Where's Logan?" I asked immediately, looking past her, expecting him to appear behind her. "He's still inside," she said quietly. "They only locked me out." The story she told made rage creep up my spine. She'd asked her dad for a glass of water after her bedtime because she was legitimately thirsty. Tyler yelled at her to get back in bed and stop bothering him. She explained, politely, that she really needed water. That's when he grabbed her by the arm, marched her to the front door, shoved her outside in just her pajamas, and locked the door behind her. No warning, no discussion, no second chance. Just immediate punishment for needing a drink. She had knocked and knocked, begging to be let back inside. No one came. She could hear Logan crying inside the house, could hear Tyler yelling at him to stop making noise. So she did the only thing she knew how to do. She walked the 3 blocks to my house alone in the dark because she had nowhere else to go. I documented everything again. Photos of her with goosebumps on her arms. A video of her recounting the events in her own words. Detailed notes, times, dates, direct quotes, the temperature outside. My evidence pile was becoming substantial. Then I called Tyler for the 3rd time, and the conversation went exactly as horribly as I expected. "Your daughter is at my house again," I said. "You shoved her outside and locked the door because she asked for water. She wouldn't stop whining about being thirsty," he snapped. "We told her it was bedtime. Maybe a few minutes alone will teach her appreciation and respect. It's 40 degrees outside, Tyler. She's 8 years old. She's wearing pajamas. She's fine. Stop coddling her. Kids today are weak because everyone treats them like delicate glass. A little cold won't kill her. I'm bringing her home," I said sharply. "And you and I are having a serious conversation about what's going on. Don't bother coming in," he said. "And I'm done listening to lectures from someone without kids. You don't get an opinion on how we parent." Then he hung up on me mid-sentence. I drove Emma back to their house, but this time, I didn't just leave her on the porch. I rang the doorbell again and again until Tyler finally answered, looking furious. I pushed past him into the house without asking. Logan was curled up on the couch, his eyes red and swollen, his cheeks streaked from crying. He looked miserable and exhausted. I turned to Tyler and Christina, who had peered in the hallway. "This stops tonight," I said, shaking with anger. "You cannot keep locking your kids outside in the cold. This is dangerous, abusive, and completely unacceptable." Tyler crossed his arms. "It's my house, my kids. I'll parent them how I want. You don't get a say. What you're doing isn't parenting," I shot back. "It's neglect and abuse." "Get out of my house," he said, "before I call the police for trespassing." Christina chimed in, arms folded. "You need to leave. We're not their parent. You don't understand what we deal with. This isn't your business." I looked at the two of them. Tyler, angry and unbothered, Christina, annoyed and dismissive, and realized neither one of them should have been responsible for children in the first place. "This isn't over," I told them. Not even close. Then I left before it escalated further. When I got home, I spent the next 2 hours researching everything. CPS procedures, mandated reporter rules for relatives, definitions of neglect and endangerment in our state. And it turned out what they were doing didn't just qualify, it hit nearly every category of legal endangerment, locking kids outside in the cold repeatedly, denying bathroom access, punishing them with isolation, forcing them to seek help in the middle of the night. But I hesitated. These were my brother's kids. Calling CPS felt like dropping a grenade into the middle of the family. It would blow everything apart. I kept hoping, naively, that Tyler would snap out of it before it escalated. He didn't. It got worse. The fourth incident was the breaking point. Mid-November. Winter settling in. The temperature dropped to 28 degrees that night, below freezing. Lethally cold for kids outside without proper clothing. At 3:15 a.m., I woke up to frantic pounding on my door again. Both kids this time. Emma was practically holding Logan up. He couldn't walk on his own. I pulled them inside and instantly knew this was an emergency. Logan's skin felt like touching frozen meat. His lips were bluish, his face was pale, he could barely make sounds, just soft whining noises. Emma told me they had been locked outside for over an hour, huddling in bushes trying to stay warm, but Logan kept getting colder and wouldn't stay awake. I didn't hesitate this time. I called 911 immediately. I told the dispatcher I had 2 children showing signs of hypothermia, who had been intentionally locked out by their parents. The ambulance arrived within 10 minutes. Paramedics checked their vitals, took core temperature readings. Logan needed to go straight to the hospital. His temperature was dangerously low. As part of protocol, the paramedics asked what happened. Emma told them everything, clearly, honestly. And once hospital staff heard that these kids had been deliberately forced outside in freezing weather, it became a mandatory report. The moment CPS got involved, things started moving quickly. Whether I was emotionally ready or not didn't matter anymore. About 40 minutes later, Tyler walked into the emergency room. Tyler arrived at the ER about 40 minutes later, not worried or shaken like any normal parent would be, but absolutely livid that I'd involved medical professionals and triggered a CPS report. Christina didn't even come. Apparently staying home mattered more to her than checking on her own child being treated for hypothermia. That alone told me exactly where her priorities really were. "You had no right to do this," Tyler snapped the moment he cornered me in the hallway, voice low and dripping with rage while doctors examined Logan in the next room. "No right to drag outsiders into our family's private issues. Your son is suffering from hypothermia, Tyler," I shot back. "He was outside in 28-degree weather wearing pajamas. What was I supposed to do? Ignore it and hope he didn't freeze to death? You should have brought them back home like usual and stayed out of things. Now CPS is all over us because you couldn't just keep this in the family. Maybe if you and Christina didn't keep throwing your kids outside in freezing temperatures, CPS wouldn't need to be involved. Did that ever occur to you? They're fine. You're blowing everything out of proportion, like always." About an hour later, a CPS caseworker arrived, a seasoned woman in her 50s named Patricia, who looked like she'd handled every nightmare scenario imaginable. She interviewed both kids separately, spoke at length with the medical team, reviewed the charts, and then asked to meet with me. I gave her everything. My notebook filled with dates and times, my detailed entries describing each incident, every photo, every video, all the recordings of Emma and Logan explaining what had happened. Months worth of evidence showing a long-standing pattern, not one-off mistakes. With every new piece of documentation, Patricia's expression hardened. She'd clearly seen plenty in her career, but this still hit her. "This is serious neglect," she said. "These children are in real danger. This behavior is absolutely unacceptable." Tyler tried everything to downplay what he'd done. He claimed the kids were making things up. He insisted they'd locked themselves out. He said I was overreacting because I didn't have children and was manipulating CPS out of spite. Patricia shut all of that down instantly. "Mr. Wilson, your brother has provided extensive documentation showing this happened at least 4 separate times in 2 months. The hospital records confirm your son is being treated for hypothermia. Both children gave consistent accounts of being locked out repeatedly at night in freezing temperatures. This is not exaggeration. This is not an accident. This is a clear pattern of endangerment. They're my kids," Tyler snapped. "I'll discipline them however I want. That's my right. Not when your discipline puts them at risk of severe harm or death," she replied sharply. "Locking children outside in freezing weather is not discipline. It is abuse, and it ends now." The word abuse seemed to hit Tyler like a slap, but he had nothing to counter with. He knew exactly what he'd done. CPS opened an OFFI. Shield case immediately. The next morning, they conducted an unannounced home inspection, questioned both Tyler and Christina separately, photographed every room, and contacted Emma and Logan's teachers. The school staff had already been worried, falling asleep in class, Emma hiding food in her backpack, Logan terrified at pickup time. Within a week, CPS had enough evidence to recommend temporary removal from the home. Tyler completely exploded when he heard. He called me, screaming so loudly I had to hold the phone away from my ear. He accused me of destroying his family, of feeding CPS lies, of turning his kids against him. I waited until he finished shrieking, then said calmly, "They're being removed because you repeatedly locked them outside in freezing weather, because Logan ended up in the hospital, because teachers reported concerns, because you refused to protect them. None of this is my doing. This is all on you. You're dead to me," he spat. "Do you hear me? Dead. You'll never see these kids again. You're not family." He hung up before I could even respond. Fine, that was his choice. CPS needed an emergency placement while they sorted everything out. They asked if I'd take Emma and Logan until either a foster home opened up or Tyler completed the requirements to regain custody. I didn't even hesitate. I said yes immediately. Those kids desperately needed stability, routine, and someone who genuinely cared. I had the room. I had a stable job. I had months of documentation showing I'd been their safe place all along. CPS scheduled a full home evaluation. They inspected every inch of my house, ran criminal and background checks, contacted my employer, and interviewed my neighbors. Everything came back perfectly clean. By the end of the week, Emma and Logan were officially placed in my temporary care. That first night they stayed with me felt unreal. I'd spent the previous 3 days tearing apart my home office and turning it into a proper bedroom for Emma. New bed, new dresser. I decorated Emma's new room with bright, cheerful bedding and posters she picked out herself. Logan got the guest room, which I filled with kid-friendly furniture and toys. Then I hit Target and basically emptied the children's aisles. New outfits in their sizes, school supplies, backpacks, winter gear, shoes, everything they might possibly need. That first night, Emma cried herself to sleep. Not because she missed her parents, not because she wanted to go home. She was terrified they'd show up, drag her and Logan out, and force them to return. She kept asking whether the doors were locked and whether Tyler could break in. So I sat outside her door in the hallway until she finally passed out from sheer exhaustion, repeating the same promise over and over. She was safe now, no one was taking her back, and nothing bad would happen under my roof. Logan adapted far more quickly, maybe because he was younger, maybe because he'd already learned to survive by rolling with whatever came. At 6 years old, he seemed genuinely relieved to be somewhere he didn't have to obsess over being thrown outside again. The first time he asked, "Can I have a snack whenever I want, or do I need permission?" And I told him, "Yes, you can grab something anytime." His whole face lit up like it was his birthday. Such a tiny thing. But to him, it meant freedom. We settled into a routine. I woke up at 6 every morning, cooked breakfast, made lunches with food they actually enjoyed, dropped them off at school, headed to work, picked them up at 3, helped with homework, cooked dinner, supervised bath time, read bedtime stories, the everyday normalcy they should have always had. It was exhausting, harder than anything I'd ever done. But it also felt right, like I'd finally sped into the life I was supposed to be living. Meanwhile, Tyler and Christina were locked into their court-mandated requirements, 12 full weeks of parenting classes, counseling twice a week, and unannounced CPS home visits. They were allowed supervised visits every other weekend. Supervised, meaning I had to sit through every minute. The first visit told me everything. Tyler spent 2 hours whining about how unfair the system was, how CPS had no authority, and how I'd ruined his entire life. He didn't ask Emma a single thing about school, didn't play with Logan, didn't interact with them at all, just ranted about how he was the real victim. Christina was just as bad, making snide remarks about how healthy the kids looked, insisting that meant the whole situation was blown out of proportion. Neither of them showed even a flicker of genuine concern. Emma barely spoke the whole time, stiff, nervous, withdrawn. Logan sat on the floor playing with toys, doing everything he could to pretend his parents weren't even there. As soon as we got home, Logan asked, "Do I have to go back to them?" When I told him he didn't, not today, he physically relaxed, as if he'd been holding his breath for hours. That's when I knew with absolute certainty that these kids were truly better off nowhere near their parents. A week later, Patricia, the CPS caseworker, called with updates. Tyler had already skipped 2 parenting classes and showed up late to counseling. Christina refused to participate in group exercises, saying they were stupid and that she didn't need outsiders telling her how to raise her kids. "This isn't encouraging," Patricia told me, frustration clear in her voice. "Most parents in their situation fight tooth and nail to get their kids back. They follow every rule to the letter. But your brother and his wife, They seem far more invested in being right than in actually parenting. That's when my mind clicked into place. What would I need to do, I asked, to pursue permanent custody instead of temporary? You'd need to file in court, she explained. And given the evidence, their lack of progress, and the children's stability with you, you would have a very strong case. But understand, this would permanently terminate their parental rights. They lost those rights the first time they shoved their kids outside at 2 in the morning. The rest was just waiting for the system to catch up. Patricia didn't disagree. I hired a family law attorney specializing in custody. It cost me $3,000 upfront plus ongoing fees, but every dollar was worth it to protect Emma and Logan permanently. After reviewing everything, the notebook, the photos, the videos, the hospital documentation, she told me it was one of the most thoroughly supported neglect cases she'd ever handled. So we filed. 3 weeks later, Tyler and Christina were officially served. That same night, around 11 p.m., Tyler showed up pounding on my door so violently it woke the kids. I went outside immediately so they wouldn't hear what I knew was coming. "You're stealing my kids!" he screamed. "No," I said calmly. "I'm keeping them safe. There's a difference. They're mine. You have no right. You forfeited that right the instant you endangered their lives. This is a consequence of your choices." That was discipline. Kids need strict rules or they grow up spoiled. What they need, I fired back, are parents who don't put them at risk of freezing to death. We went in circles for 20 minutes, his voice getting louder, his arguments more frantic. Then he crossed the line, threatened me directly, said I'd pay for this, said I'd regret everything. I raised my phone and started recording. Instantly, he shut up. Amazing how fast rage disappears when someone knows they're being documented. "You need to leave," I said. "Now. You showing up like this violates the custody arrangement. Leave or I call the police." He finally stormed off, but not before smashing his fist into my metal mailbox, leaving a huge dent. I filed a police report that same night and added the video to my growing collection of evidence. Court was set for February, 3 long months away. In that time, the kids blossomed. Their grades skyrocketed. Emma smiled more, laughed more, loosened up. Logan stopped waking up from nightmares about the cold. Their teachers were stunned by how rapidly they'd improved. Emma went from struggling with C's and D's to bringing home A's and B's. Logan stopped stashing food like he was preparing for famine and started speaking up in class. Meanwhile, Tyler and Christina technically finished their classes, but only because the court forced them to. They never meaningfully changed. During supervised visits, they complained, blamed me, blamed CPS, blamed everyone but themselves, and still never really interacted with the kids. To them, Emma and Logan weren't people. They were possessions they believed had been unfairly taken. Finally, the court date arrived. Both sides presented evidence. My lawyer laid out the entire timeline, showed the medical reports, provided CPS documentation, and presented my month-by-month records. Tyler's attorney tried to argue that the parents had made mistakes but deserved another chance, now that they'd completed the required steps. The judge asked to speak privately with the kids. Emma said clearly she felt safe with me and did not want to return. Logan, small voice and all, told the judge he liked his room at my house because I don't have to sleep outside in the cold anymore. That one sentence from a 6-year-old hit the courtroom like lightning. The judge had Logan repeat it. He did, calmly explaining how he'd sometimes had to sleep outside at his old house, but that at mine he always had a warm bed. The judge's expression hardened like stone. After reviewing everything and asking a few final questions, she made her ruling. "I am granting permanent custody to the uncle. Parental rights of Tyler and Christina Wilson are terminated, effective immediately." Tyler went ballistic. He had to be physically dragged out of the courtroom by bailiffs, shouting about corruption and kidnapping. Christina sat stiff and irritated, like the entire hearing had just inconvenienced her schedule. And just like that, Emma and Logan were officially, legally, permanently mine. That night we celebrated with ice cream and a movie marathon. Emma asked if she'd ever have to see her parents again unless she chose to. I told her the truth, that choice was entirely hers. She shook her head immediately. No. Logan asked if he could paint his room any color he wanted. I told him absolutely, we'd pick out paint together that weekend. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel grow and allows us to keep bringing you more stories like this.